Hi, and welcome to today's Daily Chronicle. Today is Thursday, April 23rd, 2026. Choosing to be child free as a Latina required unlearning Marianismo. Deciding not to have kids has been one of the most liberating decisions I've made for myself. By Jennifer Vasquez. The stereotype is that Latinx come from big families, have lots of kids, and that teen pregnancies are common among Latinas. These assumptions are frustrating and harmful, especially for young Latinas who are trying to navigate the paths they want to take. When I was younger, I was confused about whether or not I wanted to have kids at some point in my life. As I've gotten older, I've realized that the confusion stemmed from the belief that, as a Latina, I should want to be a mother. And I'm not alone in that feeling. Pew Research published a study in 2024 focused on pressures Latinas experience. According to the study, an estimated 56% of Latinas expressed they feel pressured to get married and have children. It makes me wonder how we can feel more comfortable with our decisions to not have a family of our own and not feel less than. I happen to come from a sizable family. My paternal grandparents in Mexico had 12 kids, but unfortunately lost 2 as babies. My mom, who comes from a Mexican-American familia, is one of 7 children. Of course, my grandparents lived during a time when birth control was not widely accessible or promoted, and it was common to have large families. I also think my abuelas felt it was only natural and necessary, that motherhood was their calling as women. They were born between the 1920s and 1930s. So what more did Latinas do during the early 20th century believe they could aspire to? I doubt they gave much thought to their dream and goals. I'm one of 4 kids. My immediate family isn't huge, but I always considered it medium-sized or average. I'll admit, there was a time when I thought I wanted to have children, to experience pregnancy and be a mom. My mother has told me many times how she loved being pregnant and would do it all over again if she could. Interestingly, she never made me feel like I should want to have kids. My mom encouraged me to focus on my aspirations instead of nagging me about when I wanted to settle down. While my mom grew up in a generation that still emphasized that the duty of a woman and Latina was to bear children, she wanted her daughters to know it didn't have to be a priority if it's not what we wanted. I knew I wanted to go off to college and be more independent. This goal was all the more important to me because I would be the first in my family to pursue higher education. Suffice it to say, children definitely did not factor into that plan. I took birth control seriously and went on the pill during my 20s. I didn't allow my Catholic upbringing to make me feel as if I was sinning for doing so. However, we know as women that our biological clock is always ticking. As I went from being in my early 20s to my mid-20s, I questioned whether it was time to really sit down and decide if I was planning to have children. It made me nervous to think that I was becoming less fertile with each passing birthday. I've been with a person who is now my husband for more than 20 years. So the topic of kids was a discussion that would come up every few years. There was a time when I thought I genuinely wanted to start a family. Even before we were married, my husband's parents would ask when we were going to give them a grandbaby. I would laugh it off, but inside I was confused and didn't know how to answer the question. Then, as a couple, we decided on age 27 to start trying. Why 27? I have no idea, but it sounded good to us at the time. But when I was around 25 years old, I started playing with the idea of going back to school to get my master's degree. I wasn't happy with where my career was headed, and I knew I needed to make a change. I applied and started a program at 26. My husband also had goals he focused on with his job. So 27 began looking less appealing to consider getting pregnant. It was around this time that I started reflecting on why I really wanted kids. For years, I would go back and forth between thinking I was ready for children and not wanting any. There's a memory I have that makes me sad and angry, and that was always in the back of my mind when I debated if having children was right for me. I was in my early 20s and visiting the doctor. There was another person there who was also Latina and looked a few years younger than me. As I was waiting to be seen, I overheard two nurses talk about the other patient after she left. One of them made a comment along the lines of, "Well, it's common among them to get pregnant young." I knew exactly what they were implying and looked at them. When they realized I heard their conversation and that I was Latina, they became silent and walked away. I regret not speaking up, but I was at a loss for words. Did people assume that because of my ethnic background, I was destined to become a mom? A young mom. Over the years, I got mixed reactions when I would admit that I didn't think I wanted to have kids. I've been asked who will take care of me as I get older if I don't have children. A former coworker even said she thought my reasons for not wanting kids were selfish. She was also Latina. Later, I found out she was having a difficult time getting pregnant and knew her comment stemmed from a place of anxiety that had nothing to do with me. As I entered my 30s, I was becoming more certain that I didn't want to have children. And not only that, I don't think I ever really wanted kids. The moments when I considered becoming a mother were more rooted in fear that I'd regret not doing it. As Latinas, we bear the weight that we should want to have kids, and that is just what we do. But we're not crazy for chasing motherhood. It's a beautiful experience for those who desire it. But if you don't, that's okay. A few years ago, my husband and I came to the conclusion that we didn't want kids, and we both feel very good about that choice. The child I'm choosing to take care of is myself, my inner child. I'm not worried that I'll be miserable or alone. I chose not to have hijos of my own. I continue to work through the stereotypes and pressures I face as a Latina who has made the decision to be childless. Instead of feeling ashamed, I take pride in putting myself first. After all, our existence as Latinas is significant, whether we choose to become mothers or not. How overfishing in Southeast Asia is an ecological and human crisis. Various species of sharks, some of which are endangered, while others are listed as vulnerable, are hauled on shore at dawn at the Tanjung Lore port on June 9, 2025 in East Lombok, Indonesia. Tanjung Lore is one of the largest shark markets in Indonesia and Southeast Asia, from where shark fins are exported to other Asian markets, primarily Hong Kong and China, and their bones are used in cosmetic products, also sold in China. We were fighting over who had caught more fish, and then I saw my crewmate pushed overboard by the captain. Akbar Fitrion, 29, an Indonesian crew member, says he recounts an incident aboard a Chinese-owned fishing vessel in 2022. The ship then started to drive away as my crewmate tried to swim towards us, and then I don't know what happened. The captain never reported the incident. The seas of Southwest Asia, home to some of the richest in biodiversity in the world, have long been in decline. Since the 1950s, the Center for Strategic and International Studies estimates that 70 to 95% of fish stocks have been depleted and are at risk of collapse, perpetuated by the rise of industrial-scale fishing, much of which is illegal. Legal overfishing is another factor, and both are propped up by weak regulations, insufficient monitoring, and insatiable demand. Approximately half of the world's global marine fish catch comes from the seas of Southeast Asia, according to the UN, and it comes at a calamitous cost. In the United States, approximately 50% of the imported seafood comes from Asia, with nearly $6.3 billion in trade coming from China, Vietnam, Indonesia, and India alone, according to the U.S. National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. Behind the illicit seafood trade is an opaque world standing across the crossroads of intertwining issues. There is a legacy of brutal human rights violations that have enabled sea slavery to become a norm. Those involved in the efforts of organizations like the International Freedom Fund and Thailand's Labor Protection Network, which work and end modern day slavery in the region, say many workers are murdered at sea, abused, and even brought into cycles of debt bondage. There is a lawless nature of the seas. Which has emboldened traffickers to exploit desperate fishermen and impoverished casual laborers. Then there are the geopolitical factors at play in a race to dominate the seas. China, and to a lesser extent, Vietnam, the Philippines, Taiwan, Malaysia have all built outposts on bases of shoals, reefs, and atolls. Fishing fleets, of which China has the largest in the world, are fast becoming more militarized as a result. All of this has imposed heavy costs on unique ecosystems. And led to devastating socioeconomic impacts on artisanal and small-scale fishers. Three countries illustrate the intersectional nature of overfishing. Thailand. Fishing vessels are seen docked together at the landing site of Chumpphon, Thailand, on January 22nd, 2025. Fish were in abundance before, says Mimit Hantel 53. a member of the Urok Lau tribe in the island of Koh Lipe in Thailand. But now the fishing season is a lot shorter. The variety of fish is far fewer, and I sell less. So I take tourists out on scuba expeditions to earn money. For generations, the Urok Laui plied the rich waters around them for sustenance. Sea gypsies in a time past, the villagers evolved to rely only on what they could catch and use simple fishing equipment to cast from small wooden boats. Then in the 1970s came the big Thai and Malaysian fishing boats. Fishermen in Koh Lipe say the boats fish illegally around the island, appearing only at night to escape detection and in a protected national forest area. The ships use purse seiner nets and demersal trawlers, destroying the coral underneath. Consequently, the habitat for fish. Such overpopulation Such overexploitation has led the indigenous group to turn to tourism to make up for lost income and declining fish stocks. Fishing is in our blood, Hantel said, but our way of life has changed. We can't rely on the fish. Frozen Spanish mackerel and other species of fish in cold storage in Samut Sakhon, Thailand, on January 15th, 2025. Fishermen manned nets in Samut Sakhon, Thailand, on January 25th, 2025. Small-scale artisanal fishermen shake sardines from nets to gather them en masse after returning to shore with their catch in the Gulf of Thailand off the coast of Prachuap, Thailand on January 20th, 2025. According to a 2001 report from the UN, roughly 80% of fishers in Southeast Asia at the time were small-scale or artisanal, relying on traditional practices. However, declining nearshore fish stocks have forced many artisanal fishers to venture farther from shore in search for commercially valuable species. Added to that, the government subsidies for fuel and tax breaks for commercial fishing vessels. Which have propped up the seafood industry. Rapid advancement in maritime technology has made fleets far more effective at finding rich hunting grounds, while avoiding detection by switching off their monitoring systems. Orani Jongkopa, 30, a veterinarian at the Thailand's Department of Marine and Coastal Resources Research and Development Center in the Rayong province, prepares to clean a hawksbill turtle in Prosi, Thailand on January 15, 2025. The turtle was found by fishermen in a garbage patch and was likely entangled in ghost nets, fishing nets that are lost or discarded by fishermen. That had caused severe damage to its two front flippers. He's missing two front flippers. A seafood merchant displays dried seahorse for sale in Champon, Thailand. On January 22nd, 2025, dozens of countries around the world are involved in the dried seahorse trade, with Thailand, the Philippines, Vietnam, and India being the largest exporters. As the trade of seahorses, which are typically used for traditional medicines, has sharply increased, the seahorse catch has declined over time. Seahorses are among the species protected under the Convention of International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Fauna and Flora. Lax regulations on the most destructive types of fishing, particularly juvenile demersal trawling and cyanide fishing, the capture of juvenile fish that prevents the replenishment of stocks, the poor oversight of labor laws, and the exploitation of workers desperate to earn a living have all contributed to the devastating knock-on effects for communities along the coastlines and the potentially irreversible environmental consequences. Members of a crew working on Thai fishing vessel, most of whom are from Myanmar, prepared to show their documents in port out inspectors of Chumphon, Thailand on January 22nd, 2025. PIPO inspection centers were set up in 2018, following an outcry in the international community over Thailand's gross human rights abuses in its fishing industry. As you can see in the photo, there are many men of different ages. See this man looks very young, middle-aged. A Burmese dock worker sorts fish from after a catch in a Thai vessel was unloaded in Rangong, Thailand on January 23rd, 2025. In Thailand last year, artisanal fishermen held protests over the rollback of major fisheries reforms implemented a decade ago that had helped to rebuild fish stocks in Thai water. Thai corporations, which own a significant share of commercial fishing vessels, pushed the government to deregulate the fishing industry to increase their profits. Protesters focused on their concerns that relaxing the rules would revive illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing and lead to increased overfishing. The rollbacks, they argued, would reduce transparency and accountability across the industry. And reduce checks on gear and labor. Less transparency would lead to less knowledge about what is left in the sea. In turn, sustainability decreases, hurting artisanal fishers who depend on the sea for sustenance and livelihoods. The Philippines. Filipino fishermen unload yellowfin tuna and blue marlin at a fish port in General Santos, the Philippines, on May 21st, 2025. The first time Donald Carmen was harassed by Chinese boats off the coast of Palawan was in December 2024. The following February, they harassed him and another fisherman again, getting close enough to hit their outriggers. They forced us to move away and recorded us with cell phones and cameras. I have been fishing in this area since 2016. Back then, everyone was free to fish. I would catch 400 to 500 kilograms of fish in a night and about 60 nautical miles offshore. Now, because I don't dare venture out as far, I'm lucky if I catch 200 to 300 kilograms over 3 days. Carmen said as he steered his banca just weeks later, on the lookout for Chinese fishing boats and militia. A drone shot off the shoreline in Rizal, Palawan, the Philippines, on May 28, 2025. Many fishermen have lost more than half their incomes because of the harassment by Chinese ships, limiting distances they can go out to sea to fish for specific species. Vincent Gehasan, 36, enjoys a meal in his home in Quezon, Palawan, the Philippines. Gehasan was hassled and detained for nearly a day at the sea by Chinese Coast Guard and Navy ships while out on a resupply mission the year before, and now says he's afraid to venture over the Filipino shores to fish. People say seeing karaoke at a local bar near the main fish port in General Santos, where the clientele are mainly fishermen on their day offs. Illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing is inextricably linked to the geopolitical struggle for maritime dominance in the South China Sea. Over the past 2 decades, China has rapidly scaled up its fishing militias in a race to assert control over a vast area while trying to meet the country's insatiable demand for seafood. Vietnam, the Philippines, Malaysia, and Taiwan have followed suit on a much smaller scale. The South China Sea, or the East Sea as Vietnam calls it, and the West Philippine Sea, as it's known in the Philippines, is one of the world's most strategic waterways. China's use of its fishing fleet to control trade routes and dominate territory to create maritime buffer zones threatens the food security and livelihoods of fishers in the region. Family members of Filipino fishermen placed bait lines in Quezon, Palawan, the Philippines. Small-scale Filipino fishermen unload their catch port in General Santos. The city is known as the Philippines tuna capital and hub for tuna fishing and product exports. While Chinese aggression has persisted for years in areas off Zambales, a province of the Philippines, has only recently affected waters off the coast of Rizal and Palawan, as China is believed to be building up its presence in the Sabina and Bomboy shoals, much closer to the Filipino coast, encroaching on the Philippines' claims to the Calayan Island group. From its original areas of claim, like the Spratly Islands and the Scarborough Shoal. Among some of the tactics used by Chinese fishing militias to deter fishermen are water cannons, using swarming and encircling techniques, military-grade lasers, and ramming fish boats to intimidate and drive them from fishing grounds.